This past Thursday, President Trump casually dropped a bombshell. During a press event for the big, beautiful bill, he said, "We signed a deal with China." And then he specifically said, this is what he said. He said, "In the China deal, we are starting to open up China, things that never really could have happened." So that line, starting to open up China, caught a lot of attention because let's be honest, signing a trade deal with China is big enough breakthrough, but opening up China, that's the next level. Naturally, people wanted to know more. What's in the deal? What did both sides agree to? But Trump and his officials didn't offer much. The White House later confirmed that a deal was signed and said the two sides had reached additional understandings related to the Geneva framework that was from May, right, a month ago. And then two of Trump's senior officials spoke with media. His Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, told Bloomberg that this was the Geneva deal that had been stalled, and they finally signed it this week after another round of talks in London. And over on Fox, Finance Secretary Scott Bessent said the agreement would solve the rare earth bottleneck, not just for the US, but also for the entire world. But when asked about tariff levels, he dodged the question. So here's what we know. A deal has been signed. Trump says it's opening up China, but no one knows the terms. And all the media headlines, they're focusing on rare earths. So something doesn't add up. Meanwhile, the Chinese side kept silent. They didn't say anything. And on Friday, when asked about the London agreement, China's Ministry of Commerce gave a brief, vague response. And they said, upon approval, both sides have further confirmed the framework details, including reviewing export applications for controlled goods in accordance with Chinese law, whatever that means. So, what's really going on? Well, here's what I want to tell you. The Trump administration has deliberately kept the deals vague and steered the public conversation toward the rare earth issue for one reason. The deal signed in London, or the deal they signed this Wednesday, is a secret framework agreement. And the reason for that secrecy? It's coming from Beijing. There's nothing in the deal that forces the United States to keep it under wraps. But the Beijing side or the CCP, especially those now working behind Xi Jinping's back or behind him, or those pulling the strings from behind, cannot afford to let the details come out. Not yet. The deal is simply too politically sensitive inside China. It exposes too much about what's really happening in Zhongnanhai. And I believe the secrecy was requested by the Chinese side, and Trump agreed, but just for a while. And here's why. This deal is a major breakthrough for the US. Trump had no reason to hide it. In fact, he couldn't resist blurting it out the very next day at the press conference. So, what's actually in the deal? Well, Chinese economist, his name is Su Xiaohe, recently posted a video on YouTube saying he reached out to his sources in China because when he saw, heard about Trump's statement saying that an agreement was reached with China and it's going to open up China. I mean, he got curious and reached out to his sources in China, and they told him the four biggest points of the agreement. Three concessions came from Beijing and one from Trump. So let's break them down. So let's first talk about the three Chinese concessions. One, reciprocal market access. US and China companies will get the same level of access to each other's markets. And this is what Trump meant by opening up China. So Mr. Su gave two powerful examples. So the first one is US companies could be listed in Chinese financial markets, just like Chinese companies list on Wall Street. And the second example is American platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and X could operate in China, just as TikTok operates in the US. And that's concession number one. Concession number two, leveling the playing field for Chinese state owned enterprises. So Chinese SOEs will no longer get preferential treatment over private or foreign firms from their government. That means American companies in banking, telecom, and energy can potentially finally have a fair shot at the Chinese market. And number three is rare earth. Beijing agrees to stop using rare earth minerals as geopolitical leverage. It will ensure consistent and open exports to global markets, including the US, of course. Now, the US concession, tariffs. The United States will reduce tariffs on Chinese goods to 20%. That's a big drop from the current 55%, though it's still higher than the base rate of 10%. So now let's talk about why this is earth shattering, especially for China. Now, given American companies' access to Chinese markets on equal terms will be a game changer. Chinese investors would flock to US companies, and in turn, Chinese firms will be forced to become more transparent, play by real rules, and compete fairly. And it shifts the balance of power in China's financial system away from party control and toward the market. Think about it, allowing American social media platforms into China. That will break the infamous Chinese firewall. You might ask, well, won't the CCP just demand censorship? Maybe, but remember, reciprocity. If the Chinese do that, well, the US can restrict TikTok too in the US. So, and then what about the SOEs? Well, these state backed giants have long dominated China's economy through unfair advantages, government subsidies, and rampant corruption. So, letting American competitors into China forces them to clean up, innovate, or die. And that alone would reshape the Chinese economy. Now, keep in mind, these are just the highlights of the deal. I'm sure there are other details, but these highlights answer the question about opening up China. And Trump has talked about opening up China many times before. We've heard about him saying, mentioning it, but we never knew how he planned to do it. And these 4 points, they are a concrete start. They're not everything, but at least they are a good start. As for timing, think about it. This deal was signed right after the Midnight Hammer operation in Iran. That show of American resolve may have shocked the Chinese delegation or the Chinese party elders, and forced them into action. They realize delaying any longer could come at a steep cost. And here's the most interesting part. And Xi Jinping, he wasn't involved at all. The Chinese trade negotiation was led by this man, He Lifeng, vice premier, who used to be perceived as a Xi Jinping loyalist, but he has defected. He's now cooperating with the reform-minded party elders, Wen Jiabao and Hu Jintao. So, according to Mr. Su's sources, Xi Jinping was furious when he saw the agreement, and he reportedly called it an unequal treaty and swore that he'd never sign something like that. He calls the agreement surrenders national sovereignty. And that right there is why the deal is a secret. Because if this deal becomes public, the whole world will know Xi Jinping has been pushed aside. No one with his mindset would ever sign such a deal. This agreement is essentially a roadmap to dismantling the CCP's state run economy and embracing capitalism. Even more dramatically, it signals the collapse of China's Great Firewall, right? Giving the Chinese people access to information the party has spent decades trying to block. So, those who negotiated with the US or those who are behind the Chinese negotiators know this. That's why they asked Trump's team to keep this quiet for now while they work through their internal transition. But make no mistake, Trump is certainly excited. That's why he couldn't help but drop the hint during the press conference. Now, you may say, well, what if what we heard is just a rumor, right? It's how do we know this deal will actually is actually what's signed, and how do we know it will change China forever? Well, of course, I do not know. It is just based on another man's source. But if you really think hard, I mean, President Trump has already said that he signed a deal with China, and that deal will start to open up China. So there's no question about a deal being signed, and there's no question about a deal that will open up China, right? So there is a deal, and it's done. We just don't know what the terms are. And so if you think about this, the above 3 points or 4 points are indeed what I think Trump would demand as a start.